Y'all can probably hear my nephew in the background. He's gonna go from good to bad depending on how his games are going. That's all good. Um, it's gonna be an interesting one. All right, because I'm gonna talk about the Epstein files a bit today. Right, I've been wanting to do this for a while. We had a county fair going on, a lot of stuff in our personal lives and everything. But we got a lot of it taken care of and out of the way. I don't have a fancy background or anything like that. So if you're wondering what's going on in my background, that's part of my bookshelf that I haven't installed yet. And an old picture that I haven't found a spot on the wall that I want to put it up yet because I don't want to take down family pictures or anything like that. We have some nice pieces of art. So for right now, I just left it there. And then immediately behind me is the table for my nephew's kids when they come and stay with him. So it's a bit of a mess back behind my head, but that's all right. We're not here to talk about that, right? So the Epstein files is a big deal, right? I think all of us can agree with that. What we need to really figure out and talk about is I think one of the things that people want to know is like why the Dems didn't release anything when Biden was president, right? We'll get to that. We'll talk about why some things shouldn't be released even now, and what things those might be. We'll talk about campaign promises and why we need to pay attention more to the logic of campaign promises and not just vote for something out of a knee-jerk reaction. We'll talk a little bit about deep state kind of stuff because I know a lot of people, when they voted this time around, a lot of that was deep state issues, and they had a lot, people had a lot of concerns about what they perceived to be a deep state situation. And I'm not saying that there's not corruption or anything like that, but we'll get into that. So it's not a complicated issue. Well, not too complicated, really. It's just some people aren't either thinking about some things that I know most people actually do know and do understand. They're just not applying what they do know and do understand to the situation. So we do have that going. And then, of course, there's there are some complications as far as like jurisdictional situations of that nature. So we need to understand how jurisdictional law works a little bit more. We're not going to get too complicated with that. Mostly because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have all of the paperwork or anything in front of me, and I haven't recently gone over a lot of this, but basic jurisdictional law we'll discuss a little bit so that people understand why some things work the way that they do and why it's relevant to the situations between like the situation where you make a deal with somebody in the state of Florida and why that same deal doesn't matter at all in a jurisdictional case in the state of New York or any other state for that matter. So we'll get into all of that. First, I'm going to immediately breach the topic of why the Epstein files weren't released during the Biden administration. Some of them were. Some of them detailing things about like Donald Trump's closeness with Epstein because they were pertinent and they didn't release all of those files relating to Donald Trump. I'm certain that they could have released a lot more information, but some of that was stuff that could even be scraped by journalists or investigators, private investigators, who could get access to a lot of that same information, because not everything that the FBI has that's going to be in the documentation or evidence is something that they had to take from somewhere else and keep that original source documentation. A lot of that investigatory information that they have in their files is going to be stuff that they were able to gain access to and then make copies of or photograph or document in some way that is a legal chain of evidence, so that they can say, this is what we have here, this is the documentation or the photograph or whatever the case it may be, and the chain of evidence has been followed. Therefore, we can assert that this is factual evidence and it's not bullshit, right? So that doesn't mean that. So what that means is that like an investigator or somebody else comes along, they want to also look at those flight logs or look at, whatever information it might be. And a lot of that's still going to be available at the source unless it was actual like if it was drugs, guns, materials of a nature that they would want to remove from the streets, right? Salacious nature, shall we say? Um, so things of that nature, they're going to take off and they're going to impound that evidence, or evidence that of something that was immediately used in the nature of a crime. So if it was like a firearm or a knife or something that was used in the course of a crime, they would impound that as evidence. But like flight logs, things of that nature, a lot of that documentation may not be something that they would immediately remove from premises unless it's definitive evidence of an ongoing crime or a crime that was committed. So like videotapes, of course, would be taken in there if there's files that directly relate to activities or maybe the financial transactions that were conducted in part of the crime. Some of that may be if it was like his personal documentation versus documentation at another company. So a lot of that would be then impounded as evidence versus left for other investigators. So there's a lot of stuff that other investigators can find or could find, and that was released. All right, if that makes sense. And then you have to take into account that so some of that was released, some of that information was made public, but why wasn't everything, right? Because that's what a lot of people want, is everything to just be released, all the information about every single person who may have been a participant in these crimes. And anytime we have a big bust like this, be it drugs, be it sex trafficking, be it anything of that nature, it's tough on society to know that there are people who were very potentially participants in that. And how do we go about holding those people accountable in the interim before they're prosecuted? Well, the whole process of the justice system in America, it gets tough, right? I think a lot of us would agree that it's not a perfect system, and I don't know that there is a perfect system. But in the situations like this, you have so much evidence that you have to work through. You're gonna have all these people whose identities may be somewhat obscured, or you're not certain, or you're gonna have to, these are people that you don't necessarily recognize. These agents may not recognize them. Lawyers may not recognize them for sure. They're gonna have to track all these individuals down, and they're gonna have to figure out who they are. And there's a long process in all of this, in the investigatory process immediately after arresting an individual that's part of this crime, right? So while they may know some of these individuals for sure, they still are going to have to do all of the investigation thoroughly before they do the prosecution. That means that we know that they did a crime, but if we arrest them now prematurely, we only have so much time that we can hold them before we can put them on a trial date. And even then, they may get out, and that may give them an opportunity to flee or even end their own life before we can get justice served, and to get them maybe to give us more evidence or find other bits of information that may help us to get a hold of other individuals who are participants in this crime. And then we can, get more people put behind bars. We can arrest more people. We can save more people and get them justice. So it's not usually something when we're dealing with large organized crimes like this that you can easily just go, oh, well, we're just going to eliminate these people and just pull them off the street immediately before we have the time to do all the investigations and everything else. And depending on how many people are involved and where those people are at, and obviously what kind of defenses they're going to mount, all of this is taken into account during this process. So normally, let's see, Epstein, I think, was arrested initially in 2018, was it? And then he would have his trial, and then we would start the process into all of these other people. Normally, we would have been trying to get him to flip on a lot of the other people, give us access to more of his information, things of that nature. And unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that because of the untimely passing of Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, there's a lot of feelings about that. I don't know for a fact that he did not end his own life. I do know that the video evidence that they gave us was sketchy at best. You couldn't say with any certainty that it was Jeffrey Epstein that was in that small clip. We couldn't tell that because you obviously can set a date in a system on a computer system to make a recording of a video, and to present this 8 years later, or 6 years later rather. Plenty of time to make a 1 second clip. What we do know is that the majority of the cameras that were in that section of the prison were out for a period of at least 10 days, which that's alarming to me, that in any prison, that cameras covering that much of the prison, especially a specific ward of any prison, would be out for that long. And then there's a death at some period during the time when all of those cameras are down. That just seems weird to me, because obviously he had been in there for a period of time, and then immediately preceding his death for a period of time, those cameras all failed, not like one. And their excuse was that they were still able to stream the video, so people in the guard shack watching all of those monitors would still be able to see the stream video, but it wasn't retaining any video on a hard drive or to wherever they were recording to. So that's an alarming situation, obviously, because the whole point of recording, whether it be retail or for a prison system, isn't just for the immediate monitoring of a situation. It's to be able to go back and have a video record of situations that may have happened during that. So if two prisoners got into a altercation, you would be able to see what the circumstances that led to that altercation were, who initiated it, who instigated it. If they hid possible evidence of that altercation, like a weapon or something like that, if they were able to quick ditch it somewhere, you would be able to then look back on the video and see if they ditched it and where they may have ditched a shiv or something like that. So these systems aren't in place just for the live, being able to watch it and be able to maintain a vigil at the moment, because obviously no guard's going to be able to watch every single one of those monitors at the given moment and process all that information at once. A big portion of the job of all of these security cameras is to keep a documented record, and for that documented record to suddenly vanish for that long a period of time leading up to that death is weird. So, and again, I don't want to stray too far into that. If somebody else wants to discuss that, we can discuss that, but I want to stick to the why it wasn't released during the Biden administration. Well, one, we don't typically release evidence to the public, even in high profile cases, outside of like the actual process of the courtroom itself. So we would normally encounter this evidence as they arrested individuals that were participants in these crimes. And when they took them to trial, and if it was a public trial, or if there were sections of the case that would be public, there would be evidence that would be entered into public record. And that evidence would be something that we would see, right? You don't normally have your government, your federal government, taking these cases and going, well, we're just going to show everybody the evidence just so that everybody else can have their opinion on the evidence. That's not typical. And this isn't like a defensive administration, and I'll get into why that'll be part of the campaign promises, and why it's silly to expect it to be released by the administration as it were right now, but why it matters, why people are still demanding it, and why demanding it is actually not a bad situation in this situation, right? We'll get to that, because it seems like a double-sided kind of situation here. Like, well, why is one good but not the other? We'll get to that. But yeah, you wouldn't normally see the President of the United States or the Department of Justice just be able to kind of just grab all this evidence, especially in cases that you have not yet prosecuted, and just flip that out to the public. One of the dangers that you would have with that is, let's say you did put all of that information out there into the public, right? One of the things that you run into with that is if you had all this list of all these people who were potential criminals, because again, it's innocent until proven guilty, right? We have to follow the process of the law, even if we have video evidence that may say otherwise. So we have to do our due diligence with this. So if we did put this out there and other people, the fear is that there would be people who would take it into their own hands. So there would be vigilantes or lynch mobs or people who would want to usurp the system of justice and just eliminate these people. And I get that. I completely understand that feeling. It's frustrating to want to wait for the justice system to do their job. There are people who do such reprehensible acts that we feel like, why should we wait for the justice system to do something so cursory as to put them into a prison system for 10 years when they're going to, especially if they're wealthy, because they're just going to buy off their time. It's a very frustrating situation. But at the same time, we have to at least give it the chance and opportunity to do its job. If we don't do that, then the fault can't lie on the justice system. It lies on us, right? So we have to still do that. So again, it's not the federal government's job, nor is it in any sort of norm to release evidence in ongoing criminal investigations, especially when we have not even had the court cases for them yet. We have to remember that a lot of the materials that are going to be considered evidence are likely very much to be something that cannot be made public in its nature itself because of the nature of what a lot of the evidence is going to be, being videotapes and things like that, where photographs, where it would expose the individuals who are the victims. It could expose their identities. We don't want stuff like that to be, broadcast all over the place, even with people blurred out. This is just not the kind of stuff that you want to put back out there, right? So we want them to be held to account. We want as much information as possible, but we also want it to be done the correct way, and we want to protect the victims in this. So that's why you wouldn't have seen too much. Now, if you're going to ask why was nobody, as far as I know at least, and I'm sure most of you would agree, why was nobody else at this point arrested when we're talking about the crimes that were committed out there? That I don't know. I would like to think that at this point there was enough discovery in the investigation that they would be able to say, we have, by this point, we don't need more evidence. We have enough evidence. Maybe they feel they need to complete going through all of the evidence so that they can, instead of getting 10 counts, maybe this guy has 15 counts if we go through all the rest of the evidence, and we can keep him behind bars longer. Maybe that's the case. From what I understand, there are just thousands and thousands and thousands of pages and documents and other pieces of evidence. So there's every chance that it's just taking so much time to go through this that it was taking longer. I can't say for sure. I'm frustrated, I think, just as much as anybody else, that they're not, at least to my knowledge, having arrested and made public any arrests in that are linked to this. I think it would do a lot of people a lot of good to start seeing some of these people getting taken off the streets. Some of the fears may be that if they had arrested them before, and this is conjecture, I'm not saying Donald Trump is one of the people who definitely did something, right? We can't say that until we have the evidence in hand or it's laid out in a court of law. But if they do have evidence and they thought that people who were linked to that situation may be freed by Donald Trump to protect him, that he would give them deals, give them pardons to protect himself, then what would be the point of arresting and imprisoning somebody who you knew was going to have their sentence commuted and was going to be allowed to go free in spite of those crimes to protect somebody like that? It's a very dangerous predicament in that situation. And in that case, I can understand why they would delay prosecuting anybody at that point. I'm not saying that is what happened, but that's something that does make sense in the situations that we're dealing with, right? All right. So the next step that I want to talk about then is, why is it okay for people to demand that Donald Trump's Department of Justice and administration, and FBI release these files, insofar as obviously we can, without uh, releasing any images or video that would harm any of the victims, or release any kind of content that would be unsuitable for the public consumption. Um, well, the reason that it's okay to demand that is because they literally ran a campaign where that was one of their staple points. So at this point, we would be demanding things that would say, we have evidence of who some of these people are. So what you're demanding at this point is them to do what they said they were going to do. They made these claims for months that the Democrats were hiding this stuff, or that they made stuff up. So it becomes at this point pertinent for them to prove what their game plan was. They're in the they're in charge of the FBI. They got the top two positions in the FBI that they put their influencers into, right? They got the head of the Department of Justice that they put one of their major influencers into, and they run the White House, right? And they have the AG. So they have all of the power. They control the Senate. They control Congress. They have all the power to find and release whatever they want, honestly. What we don't want, obviously, is some of that information that's damaging to victims, or unfit for public consumption. But there's plenty of stuff that would not be bad that they could have released, that would state names, or clear names, or whatever the case may be. They could absolutely do some of that. And instead, they've been spending well over a month now, I believe, almost 2 months, I want to say, trying to slowly lead people away from any concerns with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, his girlfriend and co-conspirator, and she helped him traffic these minors. She helped him abuse these minors. So she obviously has a lot of information, and she's right now saying that she'll completely talk about whatever they want as long as she's given a pardon. But the person who can give her the pardon would be one of the people who she could potentially be incriminating. So we would have no reason to believe her accounts of any situation relating to that potential person of interest. So it becomes a situation where somebody who is a potential perpetrator of a crime, and she would have been a co-conspirator in those crimes with this individual, is in a position to potentially commute her sentence. And all she would have to do is confess to a whole bunch of things for other people, and point fingers at other people, leave out anybody who might know about this person's crimes. And that's very dangerous kind of stuff. We obviously don't want that. So we have to really, really use our heads and think about this sort of stuff. It is important that the Trump administration figure out some way at this point to make good on their campaign promise to give people some information at least. If they have gone over this much evidence, as Kash Patel has said that they've pretty much completed their going through all of the evidence, then at this point the DOJ should be looking to prosecute and begin prosecutions of individuals in relation to these crimes. And to date, they still have not made any arrests or anything like that. We obviously know it wasn't just Jeffrey Epstein by himself. He had countless people there. So the chances that nobody else committed crimes, and there's no evidence of that, when they're very, very clear that he has evidence to other people committing these crimes, we should be seeing something. So whether or not it's files or it's the actual action by the Department of Justice, the FBI, whoever the case, whoever we need to use, Homeland Security, we should be seeing somebody being arrested. We should see somebody going to court in relation to this information and in relation to these actions. But we're not seeing anything, and we're seeing Donald Trump and his administration saying, just forget about this. Just forget about this massive ring of pedophiles who are trafficking minors and doing unspeakable things to them on some island somewhere. Um, no, I think everybody's answer to that should just be no. We're never going to forget about this. It should never be allowed to just go away. And it has nothing to do with whether or not Donald Trump is in that. It has something to do with all the victims of that being minors, uh, just being used, and the connections that it has are global reaches. Um, it's mind boggling that anybody would ever say, just forget about the guy, he died. Let's not worry about anybody else who was involved with this situation. Let's not worry about justice. Let's just push this off to the side and forget about this. What about whatever else? No, no, we don't do whatever else in America. We don't forget about this crime for that crime. If somebody shot my grandmother and then, somebody else shot somebody else's grandmother, I don't go, well, forget about that guy's grandma. What about what about the guy who shot my grandma? No, I would want both those crimes looked into. If a bank gets robbed and somebody's car gets stolen, and these are two separate incidences, we don't forget about one because it happened 2 weeks ago versus the other. We prosecute them both. We don't forget about crimes. We don't forget about heinous things. We don't forget about justice in America. It may take time. There's a lot of investigation that has to be done. There's a lot of stuff that has to be brought into consideration, especially when you're talking about some people may not be American citizens that were involved in this. Then you're working with, oh goodness, what's the name of the organization? It's sitting there at the edge of my brain. Interpol. So you have to work with Interpol and other agencies around the world to, prepare to arrest these individuals from abroad. And they may have to be brought to the United States to face justice. They may be looking at international trafficking that was also a part of this, in which case there's a whole global conspiracy situation with that. And conspiracy doesn't mean it's like a conspiracy theory. There are genuine conspiracies that people. A conspiracy is just a coordinated effort to hide things from the public eye. So black ops are technically like conspiracies in a way. But when people are coordinating in an effort to do things, that's conspiratorial activity. All right. The notion of conspiracy theory, which is just like, all these people were aliens, or reptiles or something. That's conspiracy theory, but that is not mean that some things that are conspiracies are just bullshit. They are not. But we have to understand that some people are still acting in conspiracy, and those are very legitimate, very real things that we have to consider, right? So when people do campaign and they make promises, a lot of the times people kind of emotionally respond to those promises more so than they think, than they use their head and think logically about what they should be thinking. And that's dangerous to do so, right? Well, when people make campaign promises, they're telling you that they're going to do something as long as you elect them. And I know most of us would agree that a lot of presidents don't carry out their campaign promises. And if you know enough about government, it's not just about who you elect as your president. It's also who is elected into Congress and who's elected into the Senate. And, are they willing to all play for this idea, right? Just because they're, all on Team Democrat or Team Republican or whatever, doesn't mean that they're all going to, want to play to the same end, because they still represent the communities that voted for them. So you have to take into consideration that a Democrat from Texas isn't necessarily beholden to all of the same values as a Democrat from Wisconsin. And they shouldn't be, because that there are points where while our philosophies may align, what we need from the federal government may not, because we still have to think about, things that are inherent to where we live, our climates, the weather patterns, things like that. The differences in economic systems that are, we get different traffic up here for what drives our economies, and than they do in Texas. We have, there's so many differences between each state. So while some of your moralities may align, a lot of your other economic driving factors don't. And a lot of what government is divvying up resources, financial resources of our taxes, and figuring out how to best divvy them up, how to best take care of our citizens, and how to pass legislation that may be awesome for this state, but may be technically harmful for this state. How do we make that work? So you have to have a lot of consideration for the fact that while you may vote for somebody for president, they themselves don't have complete authority to just do whatever they want. That's the checks and balances of our power, and it's a great system. It really is a great system as long as we maintain checks and balances. Our Congress and our Senate, even if they are aligned in party, should never just bow down to any president whatsoever, right? The day that happens is the day that you don't really need a Congress and a Senate anymore, because all they're doing then is confirming whatever the president says, and they're just one more step in the machine. Is all it really is, and it's coming out to the same equation as just having a king. We don't want that in America. We want a system of checks and balances. I fully, if I were to run for state governor or president or Congress, or whatever the case may be, if I were to make that run and I got into that position, I would still fully expect that people who, even if they were in the same party as me, they would still fight for things that may be more in line with their constituents and wherever else. Or they may disagree with me. Just because we are in the same party doesn't mean that we share all the same philosophies, moralities, or thoughts on things. It shouldn't, and that's good. If we don't have friction, friction is how you get a beautiful rounded gem. Something beautiful, shiny, and just absolutely gorgeous to look at. If we just never butted heads, if we never bounced ideas off each other, if we never contested something that we thought was wrong, well, how do we ever get to a better place? We need that conversation. We need that dynamic in all offices in our land. So we definitely need to have that in our government, whether that people are in line with our parties or not. So we need to have that. We need to have those checks and balances. We need our Congress and we need our Senate to not just bow down to the president. We need our Speaker of the House to not just bow down to a president. And that doesn't mean that they need to live in contest with those individuals, but it does mean that they need to be able to still speak their mind and to still stand up for what they believe in when, and their constituents, obviously, when they believe it is the right thing to do. So when we vote for these guys and they make campaign promises to us, I believe it's part of our duty to really think about those promises and think to ourselves, not only could they deliver on that, but would it be right to do so? Right? I do think like some kind of universal healthcare system is a great idea. I do think that's a wonderful idea. Do I think it would be right to force that on everybody and not to give people the option to a private healthcare subsidy? No. I still think that even if we came up with a universal healthcare system, I do think it would still be right to allow people to choose whether or not they want to be a part of that system, or to add on supplemental healthcare insurances or individual healthcare insurances that are not a part of that system. Absolutely. I do think that we need to have those considerations. That when we operate in a way that we can't force people into a lot of these situations. Do I think we should release the Epstein files? Absolutely. Do I think we can force this matter from the Department of Justice prematurely? No, I don't think that we should be forcing the files or the information prematurely. I do think we need to wait and get all of that information, because if we don't wait for them to prosecute these individuals and do things justly, and that information to come out during the course of the prosecutorial and the court cases as they're prosecuted, I think we run risks of evidence being uh, called tampered with, or AI, or um, having confirmation bias, or people saying that any jury would then be biased because they had been exposed to this information prematurely, and now believe that these people were guilty before they ever got onto the jury, and therefore could not be trusted to um, be an unbiased jury member. It would be insanely difficult to build an unbiased jury after releasing a lot of that information. So, in the interest of justice, do I think that would be the right thing to do? No. But damned if I don't want to know, and damned if I'm not gonna say, at the very least, let's get a list of people who weren't involved, right? If people are gonna throw names and slander, then we need to know whether or not we can say, like, okay, somebody the other day said Biden was on the list. Biden's not on the list. At least not that was made public. And if he's not on the list and people are slandering him, and they need to come out and say, we can confirm at this point that President Joe Biden was not on the list and was not a participant in any of these crimes. Just to get people to stop slandering people who were not perpetrators of these crimes, right? Honestly, I think anybody who is being said that they were a part of these crimes, while we have evidence in hand, or a lack thereof, I guess, to say that they were not somebody who was a perpetrator of these crimes. There's nothing tying them in any sort of way to all of this. I think we need to at least get that out there so that these individuals can demand that people cease and desist this, and if necessary, and if right to do so, they should be able to file lawsuits against those individuals to make them stop, to penalize them for any emotional distress, financial distress that it may have caused them, right? And I think that's just. I don't think anybody who didn't do some of this stuff should be having to deal with this. So by all means, if Donald Trump, if the evidence specifically states that Donald Trump did not do any of this stuff, then let that come to light. Let's prosecute all of the evidence as far as we can with him, take that to court, and then prove beyond a shadow of a doubt one way or another whether or not he was innocent or guilty. And then if he wants to sue the pants off of people for lying about it and defaming him, then by all means let him do that. Let him take care of it. Let him have his day in court for that, or courts, because it's been a lot of people suggesting it. So if that's the case, then let it be the case. But when these guys are going to say that they're going to release all of this stuff, that's their campaign, then they need to do it. Then they need to find a way that they can do to some degree what they promised. But we're not seeing any movement, and we're getting a lot of fabrication. We're getting a lot of redirection and being told to forget about it. That stinks. That stinks. That suggests that there's something else going on. That suggests that there's people who definitely are hiding things. What they're trying to hide, I don't know. It maybe they're just trying to protect friends. Maybe they're trying to protect people who they owe favors to. I don't know what the situation is. I can't begin to guess enough different directions at that point. But I can tell you is the sudden shift in what they're saying and trying to lead away from this campaign promise. It's pretty huge. So while I would have told all these people, and I did say to people, like, it doesn't make sense that you want the Epstein files released before they prosecute people, but it is what it is. They voted for it. This is one of the things you ran on, and you have people in every orifice that you need to have them be able to do that. And I know you think I meant office when I said orifice. Nah, I meant orifice. Every nook and cranny and orifice. So they got people in all the right places to take care of this stuff. And we absolutely have no reason whatsoever to stop and to ignore it, or to believe that they're being anything more than less than genuine when it comes to releasing these files or releasing this information, or trying to distract people from it. But that's the thing about campaign promises. You know, if somebody wants to promise something, you have to have a rational enough mind to look at what that promise is and go, can it be done? Should it be done that way? And what are the implications of it? What are the ramifications of it? How many people can this hurt by doing it the way that they're suggesting doing it? Right? So we got to use our heads a little bit more. And there's no reason we can't. Um, on the Obama thing, because now that's the distraction point, right? We can't distract with something else that's going on, because we're failing on the whole Ukraine Russia situation. We're failing on the Israel Gaza situation. We're failing on the tariff situation. Zero deal so far. We're failing on every other front of the presidency. Within 6 months, we just have nothing positive going for the country. People keep saying, "Well, yeah, things are better," but it's almost like a psychosomatic response. Nothing's been better. We haven't improved our situations with anything, so we can't say that things are better. We need to be honest and real about that, right? So I do a lot of discussions online. I'm involved in a lot of things. People tag me in things to see, you know, they're trying to get my response or trying to include me in a conversation. I do try to, you know, say what I can if I have time. And I have a lot of time lately. But one that I saw the other day was discussing President Obama and the trying to say that it was conspiracy, that he said that Russia interfered with the 2020 election, right? Which is funny because Matt Gaetz was one of the it was the lead person on the committee that investigated whether or not that was accurate. It was a Republican-led committee, if I'm not mistaken. They went through and did all this stuff, and in their report, in the words of these Republican conservatives that were appointed by Donald Trump, or were heavily backed by Donald Trump at the time, they found nothing to say that Obama was lying about it. They did confirm that Russia did interfere with the 2020 election. The way it's being reported now is misrepresentation, a misrepresentation of those findings. Right? They're trying to say that Russia didn't interfere with our election because they didn't alter votes. They didn't send in people to cast fake votes, or you know, things of this nature. But none of that was ever the allegation. That was never what was suggested, period, at that time. What was suggested is that Russia was using forms of propaganda online to put forth disinformation programs or propaganda to support the candidacy of President Donald Trump, and to make up lies about other candidates. We know for a fact that there were several right-wing influencers who got paid directly through a company that was paid directly from the Kremlin. So when a Russian agency pays a company to pay you to specifically read a script that says lies, that's pretty bad. Is there a technical law against that specific situation? I don't believe so. It's kind of unfortunate, really. It's one of those things where you really want the people who are reporting, or if it's an influencer watching, you want to know that they're getting their information from good sources, and that they're doing what they're doing out of a sense of rightness, and they're not just getting paid to feed you lies. And they're going, well, look, I don't like lying to these people. At the same time, it's $1,000,000. I'm gonna take $1,000,000, and they can, they can just deal with the lies. It's all right. But that's, whether or not it's legal doesn't necessarily mean it's right, right? I think we can agree with that with a lot of things in life. Just because something is technically legal doesn't necessarily make it the right thing to do. There are some states where it might be legal to marry your cousin. Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. But yeah, I mean, there was so much stuff. There was thousands of accounts that were registered to Russian IP addresses that were made up American Facebook accounts. Um, and it's interesting that now Facebook makes it a nightmare to create another account using the same kind of name and shit. Even using similar information is still difficult. Um, so God forbid I ever, lose this account somehow, because the last time when it almost got stolen, I tried to make a secondary account in the interim, and making a second account was a freaking nightmare. I couldn't do it. I tried like 6 different times, and they were always like, oh, this information is too close to your other account. I'm like, yes, but my other account I can't access because somebody stole it. And you can see it was logged into in Russia. Maybe the guy logging back into it from the same location should, be able to make an account again. But Facebook is what it is. They made it much more difficult. But at the same time, and they admitted as much to the government, that this traffic was coming in from Russia. There was a Russian IP address that was contacting, that was logging into these accounts and putting forward all this right-wing propaganda that was supporting Donald Trump, or that was disinformation, that was putting out false information about Kamala Harris. So you have that. You have the situation where the CIA director and the NSA directors were confirming that Russia was actively doing this stuff. They had completely fake websites that were engineered to push this same kind of propaganda for the Republican Party, for Donald Trump, or against the Democratic Party. And they were spreading lies about Biden and Kamala and Joe and, all the people that were involved, Hillary still, because they'll smear the whole party instead of just focusing on the candidate, right? Honestly, we need to stop that. We need to stop the whole party thing. Just for a second here, we need to stop like judging like a whole party based on like the individual bad eggs. But at the same time, when the party doesn't take care of their bad eggs, we need to go, hey guys, I want to like you, but you got creepy, your creepy Uncle Tom over here is doing some messed up stuff. You need to take care of that. I can't trust you around my kids if you got, the uncle who was let out of jail for touching kids hanging out at your house all the time. I know you all grew up together, and I'm not judging, that you still want to, I don't know, think that he's got some good qualities and that he can be, saved. But at the same time, if you want my kids to come over and hang out with you, you can't have that man here. And I'm going to judge you a little bit until you stand up and say, nah, it's too much. I prefer to have people who didn't do these awful things in my life. Right. So until we fix that in some of these parties, and it's not the whole party, if the majority of these people are in specific places, then the people in those places need to go take a good, hard, long look in the mirror and go, it's not about, not getting this guy in to beat a Democrat. If it's just about beating the other party, you have other options. There's got to be other people running for your primaries who are interested in those positions, who aren't awful, terrible people committing these terrible acts. I can't believe in my heart that there isn't one person who is interested in doing the right thing who isn't a terrible person just because they're in your party. I can't believe that. There's got to be great people in your party who are very interested in running for those offices, who are genuinely great friggin' people. I know this because I know a lot of Republicans, and they're freaking amazing people. They really are. So why can't we get some of these people who are genuinely wonderful people into those positions? And a big part of that is because we see it all over politics. This is not a partisan thing. We see people vote for people who have just been there forever, the incumbents, because it's easier to check a box with a name than it is to either A, write in a new name, or vote for somebody whose name you don't recognize because they didn't run last time. Well, I can't trust this guy because, you know, he didn't run last year, but this guy's been in office for 10 years and I know him. You know he did some terrible, terrible things. Stop voting for people who are criminals or who have done awful things just because they've been there for a long time. That does not make somebody great. If somebody has worked at your business for 10 years and you know they're stealing company supplies, you know they always clock out an hour early and come in a half an hour late, you know they're taking longer lunches, you know they're not putting their product together correctly, whatever the case may be, you know that they're a terrible employee, but you have another guy who's like, dude, I would be a great employee. I have all these people who would say that I'm a great employee. My college professor, the person who trained me in this field, and when I was, growing up as a teenager, they were training me how to do all of this stuff, and I worked with them for years as a trainee, or whatever the case may be, a journeyman if it's an electrician. They have all these credentials, and they're just like this brand new fresh face, but you're like, yeah, you might be great, but I don't know if I can trust you. But I know, Derek over here, and Derek's been with the company for 10 years, and I just couldn't let somebody like that go. But Derek is a terrible employee. He's a terrible employee. He's not even interested in doing what he needs to do for his part of the job for the business, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be about the business. He's getting paid to do this, and he's not doing it. So we have to start being more responsible as voters, right? We have to stop just voting people in just because. And we can't say it's partisan because there's other people who want those positions, who are part of those parties, who would be better candidates. So we need to buck up. We need to man up. We need to have some integrity. And we need to do the right thing by ourselves and by everybody else. And that means we need to start kicking people out who are our incumbents. And we need to start looking for fresh faces who are willing to fight these fights. And not the bullshit fights, not these dumb, that person's woke and this person isn't woke. This person's letting a trans person box. Look, that stuff is all absolutely fucking stupid. It really is. It's inconsequential in the long term. We need to start worrying about people who will fight genuine fights, real fights, things that matter. And a lot of these incumbents ain't it. So this, coming up on your elections, we are coming up on our midterm elections for Congress, Senate, and a whole bunch of local offices in your states. Maybe your gubernatorial, your governor races. You may be your state Congress, maybe your state Senate, your local county officers, school board, things of that nature. All of that's going to be coming up this April, right? So this next spring, you're going to be voting for a lot of these people. You need to take a good hard look at this thing and think, what have these people done? You can start looking now at agendas, at meeting minutes, at any video that may be done in these meetings, the voting records, and see what these people are doing for you. You can call some of these people and find out, what are they doing for me? What is this person doing for me that is helping me out, that is paying for my vote? What are they doing that justifies me voting for them again? Because if you're just voting for an incumbent just to, check a box, then why even vote? To say you participated? You didn't. You don't actually participate just by checking the box. You participate by knowing who you're voting for, knowing why you're voting for them. And it can't be just to beat out somebody else. You have to know what they're going to do for you. What are they going to accomplish for you? What are they going to stand up for you? So that's my ask, right? As far as the Epstein thing goes, I don't think we will see the files anytime soon, one way or another. I think if they just came out and said that, hey, we aren't ready to prosecute some of these individuals yet, we need to finish going through some of the evidence and refining our cases before we can make the arrests, or we have arrest warrants prepared and we're waiting to get all these individuals at one time so that we don't alarm a whole bunch of them and they just all flee at once. I think if they made statements like that, and even that would be difficult, because if you do make those statements, you do put people on alert who may be in those files, and they may go underground. So it's really, really tough to do that. And you do have one of those people who is in the position of presidency right now, who may be a person of interest, who may be somebody you would want to prosecute, who may be tied to other people that you want to prosecute, who can really throw a wrench into that whole works. So it is very, very, very challenging to think that we're going to get a release of the files or anything consequential anytime too soon. If there were an impeachment proceeding after the midterms, if Democrats took the House and the Senate, because that's the only way you would get an impeachment proceeding, is if the majority shifted, because the Conservative Party just won't do that. I'm pretty sure Donald Trump could go personally firebomb half of Alabama, and they'd be like, yeah, but nah, he had a good reason. Hear me out. It just is what it is. It just is what it is at this point. We're just not going to see those files for a while. We're not going to see any prosecutions for a little while. And part of it is having a person of interest in the office of presidency. I don't even know if Donald Trump knows that, because I'm going to be honest with you, the FBI is not beholden to the president in that way. So if the president ended up being somebody who was a perpetrator of a crime, and there's no way to try him while he's in the office of presidency, he doesn't have the ability or the authority to make you release files that would state that he was a participant in a crime. He can't make you give that up. That's beyond his authority to do so. So they could absolutely have information on him that would say that he's a criminal, and they would be willing to prosecute him after he leaves office, but it would have to wait until after he left office, because right now we have a Supreme Court who says that he could technically pardon himself. So we obviously don't want to do anything while he's in the office, and the Supreme Court is airing that option for him. So that's where we're at right now. That's why the Epstein files weren't released during a Democratic presidency, as we talked about, and why they likely won't or shouldn't be released right now, but also why this presidency ran on the campaign of releasing them, and why it's being held to that standard, and why they need to figure something out that they can do to manage that standard effectively, instead of putting out false evidence or fake videos or doctored evidence in videos. They need to have a little bit more transparency and a little bit more honesty with it. And they need to start eliminating some of the people who are not suspects, and they need to be upfront about that and stop using false information as political leverage to try to paint people and smear people. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, if Democrats were right now out there falsely alleging, without any evidence whatsoever, that the next Republican candidate for presidency was absolutely in that list, no evidence, no tapes, no Jeffrey Epstein going to his wedding, no videos of Jeffrey saying that, he's my best friend, we've been best friends forever, not videos of us having, or documentation of us having parties with just me, him, and a bunch of underage girls. If there wasn't any of that, not having that guy on your flight logs going to, his private island or flying with you to your private clubs in New York, or you're going to your VIP rooms or whatever the case may be. If there was no evidence whatsoever, we're just like, oh yeah, John Johnson over there is just absolutely, he's, related to this. And people would be flipping off the handle saying that there's no evidence. How could you say that there's a link? And in this case, that's the situation where people are relating people who are not involved in this. Do I think a lot of the people who are involved in it are very wealthy, elitist people, who are in probably very powerful positions? Yeah, I think there's a number of them. Do I think there's a lot of people who are on there who are just wealthy people, who, are technically powerful in their communities or whatever? Yeah, I think there's probably a number of them that are more like that, where, they've had couple, tens of millions or a few $100 million, but they're nowhere near necessarily that power level of these other guys. Do I think there's some celebrities who may be on there? Sure, maybe. But do I know? No. And I'm not going to sit here and just throw people under the bus just because. Because while I may suspect that, I don't have any evidence to support it. I don't know who those people might be. But I'll tell you one thing. It doesn't matter if that person is an independent, a Democrat, a liberal, progressive, Republican, alt-right, Nazi, Antifa. I don't care what they are. I don't care if they're transgender, gay, lesbian. I don't care what they are. If they did these acts, if they were criminals, they should be held liable. And it's not even just in this case. If somebody does a criminal act, they should be held liable no matter what the act is. I don't care what office they have. I don't care if they're the presidency. I don't care if they're a bishop. I don't care if they're the pope. I think if somebody does something bad, they should be held to account for it. That's where I stand. And if that's too much for people, too bad. I don't have loyalty like that. I've never been the person who's going to say, well, that's my family or that's my best friend, so if they did this terrible thing, I will have their back for it. Fuck no. If you know me and you know my integrity, then you know that if you want to be friends with me or be doing things out there, I'm not going to have your back for that. That you better act right. Because I'm a man of honor. I'm trying to do the right thing every step of the way. As best I can. I'm not going to say I'm flawless, but I try to do the right thing. And I just ask that other people around me also do the right thing. So that's where that stands. If somebody does a terrible crime, then they need to be held to account. Have integrity. Have some honor. And voters, we need to have some responsibility. Because voting isn't just a right, it's a responsibility. Every time you line up to vote, you're taking responsibility for the leadership and the guidance and the changes that will come to your town, your county, your state, or your federal government, your country. So take a little bit more responsibility with that. Stop voting party lines, especially for local politics that aren't partisan. They're really, really, really not. Start owning a little bit more of that. And I promise you, if you own more of it, these people will care a lot more about what you feel about everything. And their little campaigns won't be based on absolutely zero substance, and it's just, look at me shoot this exploding target. I like guns. I like guns. I'm a Democrat. Do I own one? No, because my wife doesn't like guns, and I respect it. She grew up as a kid in the gangland area in Illinois, by Waukegan, and I respect that she doesn't like guns. Do I need one? Nah. I don't live in the country, so I can't really go hunting, and I really don't need one for home defense. And not just because I live in a mostly safe neighborhood, it's because I have plenty of ways of taking care of myself. And I'm pretty comfortable with those. And I do live in a pretty good community. So I'm not too worried about that sort of situation. Um, it just is what it is. Somebody comes into your home, they break in somehow, and they're already out for killing you versus stealing your TV. Chances of you getting the jump on that person is pretty slim. Uh, so it is. You got to look at things a little bit more logically. I do like guns. I like going hunting. I liked target practicing. I liked breaking it down and cleaning my weapon systems. I did enjoy that part, and maybe it's because my DIs did such a good job of brainwashing me. I don't know, but they did an excellent job of brainwashing me. I will give them credit for that. But it's not a partisan thing to like guns. I'm a Christian. That's also not a partisan thing to be Christian or to be open to other faiths. I personally think that it's okay to be whatever faith you want to be. That's the great thing about America, is that you can believe whatever you want. You can be Wiccan, you can be Buddhist, you can be Hindi. Actually, I think Hindi's a nationality versus a religion. But yeah, you can worship whatever you want. And believe however you want to believe. That's the American thing, is that you have the freedom to do that. I don't think it makes somebody bad to not believe in the same God that I believe into, or worship that God the same way that I worship him. Because I don't know. I don't know the answers. I don't know specifically who that God is. He doesn't give me his first name when we talk. So I can't say that, my conversations with him are right, or that my interpretations of what that God wants from me are the correct interpretations. All I can do is try to be a good person and hope. And that's all I ask of other people. So they can worship however they want. That's their freedom to do so. It does not make you a better politician or a better person to be Christian versus to be being a Buddhist or an atheist or whatever the case may be. I've met people from all walks of life and of all faiths and from countless versions of Christianity, and they're all very different. All versions of Christianity are so different, and some of them think they're better than others, and that's really sad. But I think it's sad that Christians think that they're inherently better than people who choose to worship differently, to different faiths, or not to worship at all. I think it's really sad, because your faith is your connection with a higher power, right? And that's your connection with a higher power. Your faith cannot dictate somebody else's connection. They have to find that connection if they want that connection. That just is what it is. All right, before I get through preaching, we can talk about that another time. But I'm gonna let you guys go. I'm gonna get an orange drink, and then I'm gonna go beat some people up in a video game. You guys have a good night. And if you guys have any comments about the Epstein trial, or comments about anything that I said about how the documents are released, or whether or not they should be released, or how the court systems work and why they may be abstaining from releasing some of these files, given the nature of how it would influence their ability to have a just prosecution and a unbiased jury and whatnot. Hey, let me know. You can hit me up in the comments. You can PM me, whatever the case may be. I'm always good for having discussions. Just try to keep it, real, keep it logical, keep it factual. And I'm always good with having these